One second. Welcome, everyone. We'll let folks uh, take a second to come in since it is just 2:30. Welcome, everyone. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to get us started right now. Welcome to our webinar. Pulse is happy to sponsor this series of webinars for business leaders with our friends at MiLEAP. It was possible by a grant that they made. You could see this on the slide here. I am Kathy Zenda-Wilson, Co-Executive Director of Pulse at the W.E. Upjohn Institute, and I am joined here today by our friend Sherry Penny at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thank you, Sherry. We're going to get into who our other panelists are in a second, but today's focus is on getting to yes. What employer solutions do we have that work for working families? And so by the end of this, you're going to know exactly what it is you can do. So next, please. So some housekeeping. None of us are new to these Zoom webinars, but just so you all know, we are going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself in chat. We'd love your name, your organization, what sector you represent, and where you are in the state. And if you're not in our state, where you are, but where are you zooming in from? We are recording this session so that anybody who registered receives it afterwards, as well as any resources that we want to send you. We want to encourage you to actually check your spam in case it goes there, because sometimes that happens with follow-up. So just know that you will receive it at whatever email that you registered with. We're going to make sure that we're monitoring the Q&A feature for your questions. So don't put questions in chat. That won't be monitored for those. Please put them in the Q&A and we will follow that. And we will have a poll. We're going to ask you some questions that you can respond to in chat if necessary. And then we are also going to have a survey at the end that we really ask you to complete before this escapes your mind. So today would be great. And if you need closed captions, they're available through Zoom. So as I shared, we are here with Sherry Penny from the Bipartisan Policy Center today. We are also joined by Jenny Gino and Liz Van Dussen, who are representing two of our Michigan Child Care champions. We are so excited to hear from employers directly about their journey in providing child care solutions for their employees. And so you're going to learn a ton from them. We think that's one of the best ways to learn is to just really see the examples from others and see how you can apply them for yourself. And a little bit about Pulse, just so you know, we are a co-led effort that is dedicated to transforming the early childhood landscape. We like to equip communities and coalitions with data-driven solutions and actionable roadmaps. And we bridge the gap between research and practice so that we can make sure that we've got spaces where families can thrive. We do this collaboratively with partners across Michigan and beyond. And we believe that childcare has to be accessible. They have to have a strong workforce, and we need policies and innovation that follow that. So our first poll, we're going to ask you to let us know where you are today. And that is specific to your journey around providing childcare solutions. The first four responses are if you are a business leader or an employer and you're answering as an employer. And the last one is if you're in a position to actually support other employers or businesses. So we get a sense of who's in the room. All right, I can see our responses now. This is helpful. Give us just a few more seconds. All right, as I suspected, we're about 75% in right now, and we have a lot of folks that are supporting businesses. That's helpful for us to know because you are really situated to use these tools in a different way than an employer might. So just use that lens as we're going through this. Like, how could you use what you're learning today to support employers in making decisions around solutions? All right, so that everybody can see those. Okay, next slide. I'm going to do a quick overview of what we learned in our first one, just for those of us who weren't here and available to join us and didn't have a chance to review. It gives some foundation setting for us. And that is that we know that the childcare crisis is a business crisis, right? There's the intersectionality of these two issues has been well documented, and we know that employers struggle to attract and retain workers while parents sit on the sidelines. We want folks who want to work to be able to work. So therefore, we really want to make sure that we're providing solutions and changing some mindsets around this being a family issue and saying that this is an economic and a workforce imperative. This actually has consequences for all of us, so we want to make sure that we are all tuned in and figuring out what our role is in solutions. And we know based on the research, this is from the Untapped Potential report that the Michigan Foundation, or I'm sorry, Grand Rapids Chamber did a few years back, that it costs us almost $3 billion annually in our economy because of childcare related employee turnover and absenteeism. And we have over half of our parents saying they needed to make significant adjustments to their work or school training due to childcare issues just in the last 12 months, based on this report, right? And 14% of folks had to leave a job because they couldn't find the childcare that they needed. So even if we don't think that there is a problem, the data vets out that it is, and it's pretty vast, right? So we want to make sure that we're addressing it for that reason because it does cost us all. Another report from Policy Matters Ohio found that 61% of parents are not working full time. They would if they had access to dependable childcare. So that's a big number if we're thinking about the workforce that's out there that's just sitting on the sidelines waiting to try and find solutions to childcare so that they can actually get to work. And there is a perception gap here. Harvard reveals that 80% of workers acknowledge caregiving responsibilities affect their productivity, and compared to 25% of the employers. So this is important because that gap, right, it provides an opportunity for companies to step in and try and close and lessen that gap, right? Because what we know is that when you invest, you'll have 50% less absenteeism. The ROI, based on several different studies, is telling us it's up to 72%. And we know that it impacts retention. 86% in the Boston Consulting Groups and Mom's First study found that 86% of employees are more likely to remain with their employer because of childcare benefits. So we've got enough data to suggest that when you step into this space, when you lean in and say, what can I do? And we're going to let you know what those options are momentarily, that it does pay off. And so we want to make sure that we're lifting that up as a mindset. And that was the purpose of the first webinar. We also know, and it's just important context to provide, that there is a supply challenge. One of the things we hear a lot is, yes, I want to support childcare, but we don't have enough of it. How are we building supply? And so it's important for all of our champions, all of our allies in this work to understand that it is a labor crisis within the childcare sector itself, too. It's an under-resourced sector where folks are not making enough money to make ends meet. So therefore, it's really challenging for them to stay in a sector, even if they love it. And so we tried through this visual to help people understand that context of the business model, which shows us that these businesses are running on very, very thin margins. But also, if you remember nothing from this slide, it's that families can't afford to pay and teachers can't afford to stay. So it's all of our responsibility to try and address that. And we're going to talk about a few ways that we do that. So we want to make sure that people understand that we have 733,000 people in Michigan alone that have young children. So that's a pretty significant number of folks out there who are going to need care for them to be able to show up at work, participate fully, be productive, and be able to do the work that you need them to do. And so we have 29% of our mothers, they have young children, 18% of Michigan fathers that are single. That means that it's their sole responsibility to try and find care. And this came out of our St. Louis Fed Partners work. So a synopsis of all of that, right, is that childcare is workforce infrastructure. It's economic infrastructure, because without reliable childcare, parents miss work, they reduce their hours, they leave jobs, they delay employment, and it impacts your business, right? So we want to make sure that everybody is accepting this as our reality, right? Because you're probably seeing higher turnover, recruitment challenges, reduced productivity, and increased absenteeism. So our goal is to correct for some of this by providing you some solutions that you can use to make your company more attractive to families with young children and a place where people want to stay. And we're going to show you with our two champions that are on what that has meant. I want to let you know just a little bit more of the data around our childcare gap. You could see that Michigan almost mirrors the United States as it relates to this. We have roughly 430,500 children that potentially need care, and our supply is 311,240. So that gives us about a 28% gap. So we realize that we need to actually, excuse me, grapple that with that, and we're doing that in our regional childcare coalitions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go, but just a frame in your head that these aren't just numbers, these are people who are struggling to find the care that they need. Every family is stressed out about this who is in that 28%, trying to do that what they can. And I will also share that for many of you, even if, not even if, your employees may be showing up and you figure that if they've showed up, then they have childcare figured out. But people are patchworking this together, right? They're figuring it out to get there, but that does not make them less stressed when they're at work, and it also impacts productivity when they're worried about where their kids are and how they're challenging or how they're facing that challenge. All right, so we're going to talk to our friend Sherry now about a national perspective on this to help us really kind of dig into why this isn't just a Michigan problem, why this isn't just an employer problem, but what was she seeing at the national level? And so I'm going to ask her a few questions to really dig into this. And we could go to the next slide. A little fun for those of you who are Zach Galifianakis fans. Between Two Ferns is one of my favorite things to watch. So I thought, why not have us Between Two Ferns, Sherry? So thanks so much for being here. I'm so grateful to the U.S. Chamber Foundation for introducing us initially. And you have evolved in your roles. And so I'm going to give you a few minutes just to introduce yourself and let folks know who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. This is a topic area that is very close to my heart. As you mentioned, I am now with the Bipartisan Policy Center. I am a fellow who works on their child care portfolio, I guess. And previously, before that, and that is actually a very new role for me. I just started there in May. Previously, before that, I may have come across working with some of you when I was with the Iowa Women's Foundation as the Employer Engagement Director. That was a grant funded position for 3 years out of the Iowa Economic Development Authority to really help employers in Iowa understand that childcare was an economic issue, a workforce issue, and help them work on some public private partnerships. After that, I did a brief stint with Iowa HHS as the CCDF program manager to really round out my understanding of what is the childcare crisis? What are states doing about it? What are our state leaders doing about it? Not only what's happening on the ground. And then that is what brought me to BPC. And now I get to have a national perspective.
Well, we're really grateful for that. And I know that Bipartisan Policy Center has been a great source of information for us and also a great strategic thought partner. So Sherry and I also belong to, as well as Maria Ortiz Borden, my co-director, to a national brain trust that meets monthly to talk about childcare issues. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunities that BPC has provided us to connect and to learn from each other. And given that you've worked both at the state level in Iowa and now nationally, what do you see employers across the country telling you about childcare today?
Well, the good news is that people are still talking about childcare. It's something that we're hearing every single day, and that has really amped up the employer perspective of childcare. The first thing, especially even as my work across Iowa, I quickly realized that employers get it. I thought it would be a much harder sell to employers to understand that childcare was a workforce issue, that it's an economic infrastructure. Turns out they understand it. They were willing to do something about it. They understand that it's impacting their workforce. They just don't want to have to take on the bulk of solving that. They don't want to be able don't want to do it alone. They're not really sure where to start. And that the ROI really must be there for them, especially as they have to sell things to their decision makers. Wouldn't it be great if employers could just come in and wave their magic wand and fix all of communities' issues? But that's not always the case. And so, really thinking about that ROI, they were ready for some solutions and ready to step up to the plate if given a really great opportunity to do so.
Yeah, amazing. I actually had this slide up for that reason. I think a lot of folks, when we first started engaging employers, thought, oh my gosh, I have to build a childcare center, right? Like there isn't enough supply. We're going to have to build something. And the reality is, I just want to early on set people's concerns aside. Like that is actually not the answer for everybody. I'm not suggesting that it isn't work for some, but I just want people to not have to worry about that right now. So thank you for that context. What's one or what are some misconceptions that keep employers from taking action? What have you seen?
The biggest one that you have right here on this slide. It does not mean that you have to build an on-site center. In fact, I would say, please don't. Let's really step back, take a breath, and really look at the data and what's already happening in your communities on the ground at the state level to make sure that we aren't being duplicating efforts, that the data is what is that need? So, a lot of times when we think of these on-site builds, we have to remember the supply side of the demand. The demand is something that always gets front and center when we think about childcare and the childcare crisis. But we have to really step back and think about we have the demand, yes, but that supply side is right there. So, the misconceptions really are that it's their job to fix the childcare crisis. They're hearing it over and over again. What are you doing in childcare? That's not necessarily what they are. That's not their forte. Let's just say when we're talking with business leaders, they are really good in what they do. They're not aware of childcare. They're not necessarily understanding of the childcare crisis, and that's okay. That's why we have these experts in the field. A lot of them, again, think that they have to build that on-site center.
Yeah.
Not the case, especially, and that it's costly. That's a big one too. They really don't understand that it doesn't have to take a super large investment for them to be doing something in childcare. As we keep talking, I will be giving some examples of solutions that are no cost to employers, all the way up to kind of these. There are a few that an on site build is what the data is telling them and what their employee workforce data is showing that there is that need. But then there's that middle ground. And that's kind of where you'll see a lot of Iowa making the news with our solutions fund, very similar to Michigan's TriShare program. It's bringing those employers to the table. We just tweaked it a little bit to make it work for Iowa. And so we just asked them to invest $150 per employee to their workforce into an economic development supported fund to cover that operational gap funding. So there are some very easy, lower cost models that you can replicate. And Michigan, of course, has one of the best with that TriShare program going. So all sorts of things that it doesn't always have to be the on-site build. There are all sorts of options that they can come in and help with. And we do not expect employers to solve this alone. It is not their problem solely to solve, but they do play a role in that.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we learned early on in our employer engagement efforts at Pulse was that we had employers nervous about surveying their employees because they thought if they asked
Mhm.
about it, that meant that they had to solve it. And I think that that has been proven time and time again to not be the case, that folks already know this is a problem for themselves. There has to be a level of trust, right, for people to be
Yep.
honest in those surveys. But that people, if you provide some context, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, around we want a better understanding of what your experiences are as a family with young children. We're trying to be a part of this larger solution, and your information is going to help us with that. I think there are ways that we can get past that, but there was a real hesitancy at first from people wanting to survey,
Um,
right? They really had
we
some concerns.
we absolutely I felt that exact same thing in Iowa. And it you have to remind them that no one is going to the CEO typically and saying, I'm really struggling to get to work because of childcare issues. Also, they're showing up, just like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
They're making it work. But what
Yeah.
we're finding is that it's costly. Personal choice needs to stay at the forefront.
Yeah. Thank you. So, what are some of the most promising employer supported strategies you're seeing nationally? I know you've mentioned a few. So, you've talked about what Michigan's doing with My TriShare, My Care
Yep.
Share. There's going to be a lot more on that on webinar 3, by the way. And you've also talked about the Iowa Solution Fund, that
Yep.
is just a phenomenal example of what it takes to like create this integrated cross-sector strategy solutions. What else are you seeing?
Whoa, goodness. We are starting to explore a lot of these really innovative state examples. So I'm sure many of you have heard there's a couple states, well, I should say one state and one city talking a lot of universal child care. There's also Connecticut has a really great endowment system. You've got appropriations coming out of Indiana at the state level. We're starting to see Vermont and their tax credit. There's all sorts of really great examples, especially coming from the state level, and even some federal levels that we're starting to tap into with those. But then even deeper now onto those employer solutions, we're starting to see the work-life balance. Really working remotely for a portion of a newborn's life. We have a great example of a factory that did this. They had production staff who couldn't work remotely for the first 6 months of an infant's life. So what that company did was partner with a local childcare provider to pay for 100% of that cost for the first 6 months of an infant's life. If you happen to be office staff, you could work remotely for the first 6 months of that infant's life. So you're starting to see all of these, I like to call it cherry pick solutions. It's not a one size fits all. I can't say that enough for employers. It's going to look a little bit different, employer to employer, but also within your own workforce. We're starting to see employers partnering with providers for drop in care, purchasing some spaces for drop in care. We're seeing shift changes. This is one that is no cost. This was a really big lesson learned. We had a factory that just said, we don't really have a childcare crisis until it found out that there were actually staff members that had children in the cars waiting for parents that may work two separate shifts. And it was just like a 20-minute window where the shift
Mhm.
overlapped. By having that conversation, they were able to just for this short amount of time that this was going to be impacting that employee, they were able to shift the clock in, clock out time to provide that warm handoff. It cost the employer nothing, but that was still, and it goes to show that they retain that workforce because those leaders are listening to their staff. They're trying to make life easier, and they want to make sure that everyone is safe and happy and can be fully present in their work. Also, we're seeing a lot of advocacy efforts. That's huge too. Doesn't require a whole lot of cost, and just partnering with a lot of economic development leaders on that.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. Because I think sometimes not sometimes, often we as humans are limited by our own imagination, right? Like if we don't
Absolutely.
see it, we haven't heard about it, it's really hard for us to come up with these ideas, right? And so similarly in Battle Creek, we had an employer who discovered that the majority of his workforce were single working moms with school-age kids. And he was seeing a lot of challenges with people leaving. And this is a small manufacturer who's got local control. So I just want to contextually, that's important, right? So he had the ability to make some real changes in real time. And he asked his staff, like, if I start after school starts and let you out before school ends, would that work for you? He reduced the number of hours people were working. So it didn't cost them any money. I don't know whether or not there was a wage difference. I don't know all the details, but his retention skyrocketed. So did productivity, right? People felt seen if they felt valued, and they were more productive when they were there. They weren't worried about, oh my God, my kid is sitting out in front of the school right now before they open the doors because I had to drop them off at 7 o'clock and I had no before school care, right? So this is an issue where the solutions can be very, very customized based on what you know. But it first starts with listening. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit later. But so, any advice you have, Sherry, for an employer who wants to help but believes that solutions are beyond their reach?
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, look for resources that are readily available. As you mentioned, the Bipartisan Policy Center has really great free resources on our website, Childcare 101, talking about the 45F tax credits, childcare tax credits. You can really educate yourself on exactly what is the childcare crisis? Why do we continue to keep hearing about it? So going and understanding some of those resources, first and foremost, is always helpful. And again, that's no cost. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation has great untapped potential reports. The Child Care Gap is a really great national website and model for you to look at your state specific data on childcare, that supply and demand that we talked about. That's number one. Secondly, reach out to a low regional coalition, a task force, find out what is happening in your state. Go to those experts and find out what is already happening, because I can guarantee that there is some on the ground work already happening in childcare in your communities. And if you don't know where to start looking for a childcare resource and referral agency in your state, Childcare Aware of America is a great place to start, just to understand what is happening in your community and what can you do to help support that. Then the last thing really is engaging economic development. So if all else fails, please go have a conversation with an economic development leader in your city, town, county, or a chamber office, because they're hearing childcare as well. And their role is to support those employers in understanding how can we help solve this. Back to that first thing that we talked about, this isn't on just the employer's shoulders to fix. We need an all hands on deck approach. And a lot of the solutions are happening locally driven and being elevated up to the state and federal level with some of those policy changes or systematic policies that need to be in place. So having that conversation with an economic development leader to really help steer or get in touch with the regional task force, the coalitions, the organizations that are doing the work already. Because again, we do not expect employers to come in and solve this, but we do want you to have a voice to understand how it's impacting your workforce and really what can you do to help support your employees.
Yeah, thank you. We're really grateful and fortunate to live in a state where we have our regional childcare coalition. So if you are not connected yet to that, we will make sure that in the follow-up materials, we have all the links to all of those organizations that Sherry just mentioned. And we'll also make sure that you've got a link to the Early Childhood Investment Corporation's Regional Childcare Coalition site, so that if you are not yet connected, you should be. And I can say that both of the employers that are on our call today with us are connected and have been deeply engaged in those efforts as well. And it is a place where you're not going to feel so alone. You are not doing this by yourself, which is a really important part. Now, the last question I have for you, Sherry, is really like, have you seen employers that have shifted their approach, their thinking from it being just an employee benefit, and I use just very casually there, but to a business strategy?
Yeah, we're really starting to see a lot of that engagement coming from the understanding of exactly what it is that this is costing them if they are losing those employees, or as they're starting to see that they have positions open. Childcare isn't necessarily going to be that solution and that fix, but we have the data to say that it is a big reason why we're seeing a lot of people either leaving the workforce, not able to stay in that workforce. So really prioritizing this almost like a menu of benefits. So a lot of times we're seeing them say things like, well, I'm not really sure, not all of my employees are going to be eligible or really need child care benefits. No, but you also offer all sorts of benefits like health club benefits, health insurance benefits. Some even offer pet insurance benefits when not every employee has a pet. So I really encourage them to look at this like a menu of benefit options that some employees will tap into, and others not necessarily. But at the end of the day, your employees are going to feel very heard and supported and cared for. And that's really where we're starting to see that retention efforts are, as you mentioned, going up tremendously when there are childcare benefits that are available. And at the end of the day, really just continue to keep talking about childcare, have conversations with your elected officials, about things that are happening, about policies that you'd like to see, or about how it is impacting your workforce. Because without those stories, it's easier for us to sell it to Congress when we see that those employers are having those same conversations with their elected officials, and it keeps the conversation going. I always like to say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So the more we continue to talk about it, the more we'll start to see just some sustainable investments, not even financially, but just policy investments as well.
Yeah, I think from 2020, when Pulse started deeply engaging in this childcare work till now, I could tell you it is night and day. When it was
Yeah.
barely uttered, especially out of business leaders' mouths, to now it being a normal part of the conversation. You hear it when people are saying, if I'm thinking about expanding my business, I want to go to a place where there's housing, there's childcare, and there's good transportation, right? It's like being packaged now, not as an afterthought, not as just a family issue, but if I want to my business to thrive, this is something I have to look at, right? And I can't just assume other people will solve it. I want to be part of the solution. And so I'm really grateful to all those who've stepped up. We have Michigan Child Care Champions. As I've said, we've got two of them here on the call with us today, for that very reason. We want to celebrate and honor those who are stepping in, leaning into this and saying, I may not be able to figure it all out. It may not be perfect, but we've got to do something and we're willing to kind of step into it. So we're really proud of everything that's happened in Michigan, and we know we can do more, right? Which is a big part of this. So we're going to transition right now to us talking about the role employers play, and Pulse has something called the Pulse Roadmap, for those of you who aren't aware yet, that was actually inspired by work that the U.S. Chamber Foundation had done years ago, that we just customized for Michigan. And it is an iterative and an organic document that changes as we learn more. But what I want to do is help you understand like the categories of ways that employers can show up, like what different roles you can play. And the first one in the circle over here on my left is being a leader inside your own company. We've heard a lot about this, right? And if you want to do the things that we talked about, like reducing turnover, increasing productivity, building a stronger recruitment pipeline, all of those things that we've just mentioned, then you can step up and support your workforce. And that's great. And if you want to stop there, awesome. That's okay. But if you're saying, I see that this is a challenge beyond my four walls. I see that if I want people to be able to access quality, affordable childcare, that there isn't enough of it. And I have to help build that ecosystem. And I might have a role. It might not be financial, it could be strategic. It could be that I just understand that there is a coalition I could join where I can be part of those solutions, right? So that leads to, when we're doing that, that leads to increased supply when we're creating the conditions and communities for childcare to thrive. That third level, for those who are brave and strong enough to step into this with us, which we've got several examples of this, and webinar 4 will really, really focus on this, is the role of employers as advocates, right? Using your voice to unlock policy, investment, and systems change that build a stronger economy because you see the connection and you understand that. None of these three roles requires you to go solo. They are all with support. And so we're going to talk today mostly about what's in that circle, about what you can do for your own workforce. But we will touch very briefly on those others a little bit because it's a teaser, because we really want you to come to 3 and we want you to come to 4. And webinar 3 is going to focus on how you finance everything we're going to talk to you about today. And then webinar 4 is going to be how you use your voice to change the system. So let's get into these roles and what you can do for your own workforce. And we know that there are levels of solutions that are available to you, right? And they all start with listening and learning. If you do not know what your workforce is experiencing, if you're not positioning yourself in a place to hear that, you can make assumptions that lead to strategies that are ineffective. And we have lots of examples of that, not just in the childcare space, but overall. People make assumptions that lead to action that isn't always as effective as it could be. The second level that we're going to get into a little bit deeper is building a family-friendly workplace. And some of these are no cost, right? It's really just about what can I do to ensure that our policies and our practices are aligning with our workforce that have young children. And Sherry mentioned some of those examples of what she's seeing nationally. A lot of those folks are just really taking a deep look at how they actually operate and saying we could do better, right? Like, let's think about this. This is a period of time in folks' lives that we want to be supportive because we know that it's going to pay off. The third is investing in affordability. How are you helping your workforce pay for the care that they need? And this is a section that we're going to go really deep in webinar 4 or webinar 3, but we will talk about it a little bit today and the different options that you have. That leads us to that expanding access that really talks about that ecosystem building and then eventually to leading systems change. We will talk about each of these, but we're really going to dig deep into these first 3, a little bit into the 4th. So listening and learning, right? So we know that it is critically important, as I've shared. We're going to tell you a little bit about what that might look like. So we want to make sure that this is from the Pulse website. This is a screenshot from our site itself. So this is a place that we encourage you to visit and visit often. So if you want to understand your workforce's reality, you can actually go here. We can go to the next slide and learn about how you can survey your employees. This is something that we've created some templates. It's in PDF, it's in Word. We encourage you to use things like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey because they are free and they'll allow you to get information that is then a lot easier to analyze when it's in that form. We also put it in a Word format so that you can customize it, make it your own. If there are additional questions you want to ask, or if there are questions that you don't think are relevant to you, please feel free to change it as you need to. Whatever data it produces is what's important. The survey itself is really not what we're all that worried about. It was built off of something that we learned from the Policy Equity Group, who was doing employer surveys in Virginia. And so we did have a base of knowledge that we use for that. But we want to make sure that you've also got some sample language. So you'll find that in there. So for instance, we suggest people say, we want to learn more about your childcare experiences and challenges so we can work with our community partners to identify solutions. That gives you a little bit of cover, because remember when I talked earlier about there being some resistance, some hesitancy from some employers about how they would position this because they were afraid people would expect solutions right away. This gives you a little bit of cover to say we're trying to be part of the solution in our community, not that we will definitely have those for you. And then, make sure that you've got 3 main elements in your survey. I know you can customize it, but you want to make sure that you've got demographics that may have a bearing on their need for childcare, the ages of their children, maybe where they live, so you have a sense of what they're experiencing. Michigan State University has some great childcare desert maps already developed, so it would be beneficial for you to understand what is the supply in your community and your surrounding area. What are your employee childcare needs in their current circumstance so that you can measure that out? Because like Sherry mentioned, I've already talked about people are patching it together, but that does not make it ideal or actually very workable and not necessarily the best for the child themselves. And then employer provided supports that would be helpful in addressing their childcare needs. It's an opportunity for you to lift up what you're already doing in this survey. Because what we have found is that maybe I got hired in 2020 and I was nowhere near even thinking about having children. It's 2026. I've decided to start my family. I do not remember everything that's available to me. So it's another way for you to really lift up the things that you're doing. What is your family leave policy? What are you offering your folks as they enter that phase of their life? So please do that. The next is around calculating the ROI, and that's the return on investment that Sherry was talking about too. This is a critically important one because if you have to get to, this is interesting because this isn't always as linear as people want it to be. Can you go back 2 slides really quick, Angie, first? I just want to emphasize something. These 4 things need to be present for you to really take action strategically, right? You need to understand your workforce's reality. You need to quantify the ROI. You need to build internal buy-in, and connecting with your community is critically important. Now, the order in which you do these is going to be dependent on your organizational culture, right? For some of you, you may need to build buy-in before you can even get to a survey, or recognize what the ROI is. So you'll determine where you start. So while I've done this in what feels like a linear way, just know that it's going to have to work for you and you know your culture best. Okay, we can go back. Thanks. So we share on the Pulse Roadmap website the Adecco ROI calculator, and It actually allows you what Sherry was talking about. What does it cost us when we turn somebody over? What is it costing us when people are leaving because they don't have childcare? You can actually calculate some of that here. It will take you to an external site to do this, but we encourage folks to do that if they need to be able to provide some value to this to the people that you need to get buy-in from, which gets to our next point, which is about that buy-in. For larger companies, right, you're going to want people representing each of these roles to make a really informed strategic decision. For those of you who are with small businesses or you're supporting small businesses, this might be one person, right? It might be the person who wears all the hats in your company and they have the ultimate say, but they need to be thinking of it from these different perspectives. What is HR going to need to do to implement these practices that I'm talking about? How are we going to market it, not just to our internal folks, but to the people who we might be trying to attract? What is it going to take for us to operationalize this? How are we going to pay for it? And our CEOs, our C-suite folks, it's like, how am I going to say yes? Right? So when you pull this team together, these perspectives are what's critically important for us to be able to get to yes. Right? So as you're thinking about this and you're entering it, those tools are available for you on the Pulse Roadmap website. We encourage you to visit there and see about what is your strategy for getting started. All right, so our second level, that first level is really about just getting to yes, right? Like we've got people saying, yes, we're going to do this now. The second level of that we mentioned earlier is really about building family-friendly workplaces. And these are often low cost and high impact solutions. And some examples. Now we're going to run through these because we really want to get to the meat of this, which is hearing from our employers, right? So we talked several times about flexible scheduling. People value, survey after survey, people value flexibility when they have young children. And it is, I don't know how many of you are parents on this call, but it is not, they're very unpredictable little things. And so you having flexibility to be able to manage your life, your professional life with your personal life is really important, right? Another one I want to lift up, and this is very sector specific often, especially around service industry, is predictable scheduling. I have a 32-year-old daughter who is a baker, and she doesn't know week to week what her schedule is going to be. She does not have children, but if she did, I think often what it would be like for her to have to try and find care. Those things are pretty incompatible, right? So inconsistent scheduling along with finding childcare, a real challenge, right? Shift swapping. Will you allow people to look at what it's going to take for them to actually work in a way that aligns with their family's needs? And I cannot emphasize this enough, is really looking at your leave policies, because when people feel like they have the ability to stay home with their child at the most critical time and do their own healing as well as their own bonding and helping their child develop, they are much better positioned to be a retained employee, right? They're going to feel like you see their value, that you understand their worth. And they want to be able to do both, right? They want to be able to support their profession and progress, but they also want to make sure that they're with their child. And so look at your leave policies through that lens. Have a few other folks look at it with you to say, is this sufficient? Is there more we could do? I loved the example you used about those first 6 months with that manufacturer, right? Like thinking about a time frame, a period. Our county health department and one of the departments actually had a bring your baby to work policy, where if you worked it out with your teammates, you could bring your baby for the first 6 months or the first year of their life, as long as there were the pieces in place that you needed to have. Remote and hybrid work where possible. We've talked about that. I know that nurses can't work remotely, right? We're not under any expectation that this is relevant for everybody, but where it's possible, what can you do? And then a very low hanging fruit is help your families get connected to the care with what's out there. And every one of you have access to a child care resource and referral support in your community. Make sure that even if that's just on your website or your HR team is aware of it and they know where to direct people, that's a really valuable resource and an example of what you can do that's really low cost and high impact. And the next level is investing in affordability. And that's really about helping employees pay for care because I don't know if anybody knows this, if it's a big secret to anybody here, but it's expensive to care for kids. And what did we say on that one slide? families can't afford to pay and teachers can't afford to stay. There is a reality to this that it is a high cost thing and it is the most expensive time in a family's life. Often when they are making the least amount of money, right? Because it's younger people who aren't as advanced in their careers. So what are some of the examples of this? So we have stipends that you can create that will go directly to pay for care. You can set up FSAs. You can have scholarships that are outright gifts to folks so that they can pay for that. You could pay for emergency care if that's what is vetted out in your data, that's what people need, is that they really struggle when their childcare closes or there is some other emergency that happens. In Michigan, we have My TriShare and now My Care Share. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, TriShare is a three-way split for the cost, where the state, the employer, and the family cover the three. And the Care Share is just the employer pays a third and the family pays two-thirds. This was the state's solution to folks who didn't qualify for TriShare. And so it's really expanding our reach so that employers still have a way to participate at that state level. And then offering flexible benefits like that meet other needs, not just childcare. And I think we're going to hear from Duncan about some of the things that they have actually worked on in this space. And then fourth is expanding access. So how are you supporting the childcare ecosystem itself? And this is really where our regional childcare coalitions come in. Next slide, please. But in addition to that, there are shared service models. In Michigan, we've got the child care back office. So how are we making sure that we're aware of those things that can strengthen our child care sector and ecosystem itself? We have employers who've purchased slots that help stabilize these child care businesses because then they know they've got confirmed income. We have consortium approaches where you have multiple employers coming together and partnering with a particular center and saying, this is what I want to do. You can sponsor childcare expansion in spaces where you know that it's needed. You can look at community investment strategies. So if you're a part of a coalition, there could be things that they're saying, if you contribute to X, we're doing wage boosts initiative right now in Michigan so that we're trying to improve the pay for our childcare workers. And then again, the childcare coalitions, which on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more about. Right. So the goal with the childcare coalitions is really to put this puzzle together, right? We want to create synergy between economic development and childcare. We need to build the supply. We need to strengthen those businesses, including their workforces. We want to improve compensation for that workforce, and we want to collaborate with employers. This is all done through the Child Care Innovation Fund at the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, and they are incredible partners and a great source of information if you want to go there. And then fifth, which again I said is going to be the focus of our fourth webinar, you do not want to miss it because it's going to be great, is about leading systems change for long-term community-wide impact. And this is really about, go to the next slide, using your voice. So it's how do you engage in public policy advocacy? This is not you lobbying for something. This is you using your voice to say, this is important, and I need you to know that me as a business leader needs these things for me to be successful in this state, right? So it's being able to amplify that. And let's be honest, those of us who've been working in the early childhood space for a long time, we kind of get drowned out. But if a business leader says something, it is heard in a different way. Our coalitions come in this space as well. We've got those community investment funds we talked about. We've got Michigan Child Care Champions. Even if you're not a champion, you can be one. And we invite you to check our website for when that is happening because we'd love to have a room full of people celebrating all these champions. It's our third year this year. We have case studies that have been written. Duncan is one of them. We are in the process of publishing 4 more this year. And we've got cross-sector partnerships. So we've got people coming to the table who haven't worked together before, like our municipalities and our economic developers and our childcare businesses. So when you go to our website at thepulseroadmap.org, you will have all of that at your fingertips to be able to really understand where you fit in. And I hope that what you get from that is that there is no wrong door and there is no wrong way to start. Readiness is a myth. There is a place for you to start. And if you think you don't have a childcare problem, I mean, I remember early on in these conversations where we had an employer who said, I don't have a childcare issue because I only have men who work here. And I had to check my face before I responded, but I said, I'm sure you have plenty of fathers on your workforce that are concerned about where their children are and how they'll afford care. What we want folks to know, though, ultimately, is that there's no sitting on the sidelines for this one. There is something you can do. There's something you could do tomorrow, right? And we know that every major study that's been done reaches the same conclusion. Benefits pay for themselves. So even if you're a little worried about investing financially, know that every company that's been studied shows that it actually pays for itself. And we know this opportunity remains vastly untapped. There's a lot of potential here. 13% of civilian workers had access to employer-provided childcare as of 24, and this was the Bureau of Labor Statistics data. That leaves enormous room for businesses to gain a competitive edge. Do you want your business to stand out? Offer something that's family friendly or childcare specific, and it's going to make people pay attention to you, right? So we're gonna shift now to hear from our friends who are actually doing this work. And so I'm really excited to share our time here with you today with Liz Van Dussen from Duncan Aviation and Jenny Gino from Hemlock Semiconductor in different parts of the state doing different kinds of work, but both approaching this with a passion, an energy, and just a commitment that is commendable. And so we're going to turn it over to Liz, who's going to talk to you about Duncan Aviation right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kathy, and good afternoon to everybody on the call. As Kathy said, I'm Liz Van Dussen, and I currently serve as the HR manager here at Duncan Aviation in our Battle Creek, Michigan facility. So first and foremost, thank you to the teams at MiLEAP and Pulse for the opportunity to be here today and their efforts in organizing this event. We appreciate the invitation and the partnership. And then most importantly, thank you to everyone on the call for taking the time to participate. We recognize that your time is valuable and we appreciate everybody's interest and engagement to be part of today's discussion. So first, for those on the call that may not be familiar with Duncan Aviation, we are one of the largest family-owned business aviation service providers. We've been doing this for nearly 70 years, and we've been dedicated to supporting aircraft owners and operators through a wide variety of services that include aircraft maintenance, avionics installations, interior refurbishments, paint, and engine support. And we operate from 3 primary locations. We're headquartered in Lincoln, Nebraska. We have a facility here in Battle Creek, Michigan, and then our newest facility in Provo, Utah. Our team consists of more than 3,100 team members, and we also have satellite locations sprinkled across the US as well. Next slide, please. So what stood out to us here at Duncan Aviation was that people weren't just talking about childcare, but childcare was becoming a retention issue for us as an organization. We were hearing from talented, high-performing team members who loved their jobs, but felt they had no choice to leave us because childcare was unavailable, unreliable, or simply unaffordable. And we began to take it seriously because we heard the same message through multiple channels. So it showed up in exit interviews. It showed up during our monthly one-on-one conversations that were taking place between leaders and team members, and then through our culture audits that we produce every 18 months. All of these channels that we were hearing this message helped us to validate that this was a real challenge for us as an organization. We also held open discussions with our facility COO, where our team members and their family members openly shared their childhood challenges that they were facing. And those conversations quickly put real stories behind our data. It wasn't just about finding childcare, it was about long wait lists, changing work schedules, backup care challenges, and overall the stress that families were carrying while they were at work every single day. And next slide, please. So what we learned quickly in our listening sessions, nearly 2/3 of our participants said that they currently consider leaving the organization because of these challenges. We heard stories from team members putting childcare expenses on credit cards, families piecing together childcare arrangements through that patchwork method. And recently, we even had a team member last week that left the organization because her childcare solution fell through only days before she was scheduled to return to work. Many families are facing 1 to 2 year wait list to secure a spot in a child care facility in our area. And what we thought was important is that we didn't go into this assuming we knew the answer. It became very clear to us that we needed to take some time to make sure that we really understood this problem. And when the same story started coming from multiple sources, that's when we knew it wasn't an isolated issue, it was a workforce issue. Next slide, please. So one thing that may be a little bit different for Duncan Aviation and our approach is that we didn't focus on creating one program for everybody. Instead, we focused on creating more choice for our team members. Flexibility was viewed as an opportunity to create greater work-life balance by moving away from more traditional work structures. And the team has talked about this already this afternoon. For us, this included being less rigid with standard working hours and shift schedules, allowing team members more autonomy in how and when work was completed, while still meeting the needs of the business. What's important here is that flexibility wasn't limited to our salaried office staff. We really worked to create flexibility for our direct team members in the hangars. Those are the folks that are providing service on the aircraft every single day. We also expanded what we call our team member choice program. So based on years of service, our team members receive additional employer-funded dollars, and they can decide where those dollars have the greatest impact based on their need currently. Some of our team members chose to invest in their 401k. Others chose to invest in a dependent care FSA. Some elected to choose more paid time off, and others used those funds to put into a lifestyle spending account. Kathy touched on this a moment ago, but the Pulse Employer Roadmap talks about meeting families where they are through a variety of supports rather than assuming that one solution is going to fit everyone. And that really resonated with our leadership team. We recognize that some team members needed schedule flexibility, others needed financial support, and others simply needed more options. So our focus became creating flexibility and choice rather than prescribing a single answer for this issue. Next slide, please. So the biggest surprise for us at Duncan Aviation was that flexibility often mattered just as much as money. When people think about supporting working families, they immediately think about the financial benefits, and certainly those are important. But what we heard from team members was that having a greater control over their schedules often reduced stress more than a specific dollar amount. Another lesson that we quickly learned was that small changes have a big impact. Not every solution requires a major investment or a brand new benefit. Sometimes it's somebody in a leadership role just working with the parent on scheduling or a shift adjustment or giving somebody more choices in how they use their benefit dollars. We also learned rather quickly that it's okay to try new things that don't work exactly as planned, and that's okay. We did try partnering with a local healthcare facility to reserve childcare slots as they became available, but that really didn't work for our team members. However, I think what is important here is that this demonstrated to our workforce that we are willing to try new things because we care, we're listening, and we are committed to helping make a difference. You don't always have to build something new. Sometimes the most impactful thing you can do is improve communication, help team members navigate the existing resources, and create opportunities for them to share what they're experiencing. And I think these steps can be a low cost but meaningful solution. Next slide, please. So also at Duncan Aviation, we view listening as a continuous process, not just an annual event. So we conduct these monthly one-on-one meetings, exit interviews, and culture audits. After each cycle, we develop plans to address the needs of the workforce, to improve the team member experience and our culture. We've also found tremendous value in creating opportunities for direct dialogue between our team members and our senior leaders. We continue to hold these open discussions with Andy Richards, who is our facility COO. You can see him in this photo on screen here, where team members shared their realities of balancing work and family responsibilities. And this gives Andy, direct dialogue gives Andy insight that we may never uncover through surveys alone. One lesson I'd like to really emphasize is the importance of top-level engagement and involvement. As a mom of four, I certainly empathize and understand what our team members are going through because I've faced them daily. But what's truly made an impact is having Andy actively involved as a listener, an advocate, and an ally. Although he hasn't personally navigated these challenges in decades, He demonstrates a willingness to learn and champion solutions, and that's had such a significant impact on our team members. Andy has done things like join regional childcare coalitions. He advocates for solutions on behalf of employers and families, and he really helps to elevate these issues beyond our organization. For me, as a Duncan Aviation team member, knowing that I have that level of leadership support behind these efforts is truly one of the reasons I committed to remaining at Duncan Aviation. And then next slide, please. So a couple key takeaways, things we've learned here. My advice would be to really start listening before you try and solve. Assess what's happening in your organization, talk with team members, understand the specific barriers that they're facing. Don't assume you know the answer. Let your team members help define the problem before you as leadership begin designing solutions. I think that oftentimes organizations feel pressure to launch a large-scale program immediately, but meaningful progress often starts with pretty small changes. And then I'd also encourage employers to think beyond their own organization. Childcare is a workforce issue. We've said that multiple times today, but it's also a community issue. So employers, childcare providers, schools, chambers of commerce, economic developers, I think we all have a role to play. And most importantly, recognize that people are in different stages of their life. I think the best way to support isn't always the same support across the organization. Meeting team members where they are is what matters most to team members and their families.
Liz, thank you so much. If you're in the audience right now and you're wondering what a childcare champion looks like and sounds like, you just heard it, right? Like, I am just beaming with pride from where we were, because Duncan Aviation was one of the first 3 champions that we called the Little C champion in Battle Creek that we worked with and helped us figure out what the roadmap needed to be. So they allowed us to walk alongside them. They gave us feedback as we were developing the tools we thought businesses needed. And you will hear directly from Andy Richards in webinar 4 about the work he's doing as an advocate for childcare at the state level and nationally. And I can tell you that they don't just, they walk the talk, right? So their ability to actually embed this into the fabric of their organization is really inspirational. So Liz, thank you so much. It was really wonderful to hear from you and to just see the whole suite of things that you're doing. And Jenny, we're going to turn it over to you. Different part of the state, different kind of work that you're doing. Your journey's been different, but I'm really excited to hear from you. So why don't you start by introducing yourself?
So good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your time and an opportunity to talk about this critical issue. In addition to it being a workforce issue and a community issue, it's also an infrastructure issue. My role at Hemlock Semiconductor is a workforce development manager, and so I happen to think everything's a workforce issue. And this is just a critically important piece to me personally. My background is actually in education. So I've been with Hemlock Semiconductor for just a couple of years now. So next slide, I'll give you a little bit of insight into who we are. So we've been around since 1961, and we've been a leading global provider of hyper pure, the most pure substance made by man on Earth, polysilicon. And it's the only polysilicon manufacturer that's headquartered in the US. Our polysilicon is used to make computer chips, which are the brains behind the electronic devices that we rely on to make our lives easier, safer, and more enjoyable. HSC is just one of 5 major manufacturers in the whole world that makes polysilicon used to create semiconductor wafers. In fact, nearly all of the electronic devices in the world contain HSC polysilicon. So the phone that you're using today likely has our poly in it. We're also moving the world toward a greener future by supplying the rapidly growing solar power industry. The low embodied greenhouse gas emissions in our polysilicon materials facilitates the production of ultra low carbon solar panels. And these panels allow solar project developers and owners to lower the embodied carbon of their projects by up to 50%. So environmental pieces are very important to us. In addition to that, we're very philanthropic, very invested in our community. And so when we talk about things like childcare, it's about living our core values as well as supporting our employees. Next slide. So when I first came to Hemlock Semiconductor, they were in conversations about childcare, and yes, building a center was on the table. And so since my background was in education, I wasn't hired for that. I just raised my hand and I said, "Hey, can I please help? I have a lot of years of experience, and I'd like to be able to offer insights." And so thus began the journey, the deep, rich journey of meeting extraordinary people on that path, such as Kathy and Jerry and Liz and so many others, and trying to figure out what those best solutions were. Because one of our core values is investing in our community, to me, it made sense to invest in local providers and see what we could do to support that. So more on that later. But some of the things that leadership was noticing were gaps in recruitment and retention efforts, particularly with early career employees and parents coming back to the workforce. Some were just electing not to, or just to entirely stay out of that. When we started engaging directly with employees instead of pontificating about what we think might be happening, we were talking to them about their barriers and like to engagement and productivity and coming to work. And childcare just emerged as one of the most consistent pain points. Our workforce intelligence indicated that employees were delaying start dates. They were managing shift changes to accommodate their childcare schedules. And in some cases, they were deciding that advancement opportunities were not for them because they didn't have reliable, affordable care. It just wasn't accessible. I should mention that we are a 24/7 chemical plant. So it's not an option to not have people on shift. It's not an option to not have a full shift. You do get called in if people, call in sick. I mean, it's an essential piece to our safety and our production. So it became clear that addressing childcare was foundational to building a sustainable talent pipeline. But it also was important to us in supporting our employees with something that had somewhat risen to the top as a need. Next slide. So getting buy-in is key. I'd like to echo so much of what Liz said. I mean, that had been our experience as well. And when you talk about childcare, sometimes it's viewed as a gender issue. I think Kathy had mentioned that as well, but also as maybe not as important to the business because you're really looking at very different things. So helping people to see why it's important and calculating that ROI was absolutely essential. So I ended up to do this and I was brand new, right? I knew many people, but in the scheme of things and the number of employees, like not that many, right? So being able to build that trust with one-on-one and anchoring this issue to metrics that we were already measuring, things like recruitment and retention and absenteeism and engagement, succession planning, you name it. So we work to really position childcare within our total workforce strategy that I was responsible for, and framing it as a talent initiative as well as a benefits add-on. We also conducted several childcare surveys and talked to people one-on-one, had structured conversations, engaged a third party in some of those conversations to make sure that people felt like they could, share what they wanted to. And just those roundtables with our leaders as well, so that we could surface examples of how those childcare barriers were potentially impacting teams. So connecting it to available state resources also helped us move the conversation to action really quickly. We brought in our Great Start to Quality partners early on to help people find licensed childcare, and maybe they just couldn't find exactly what it was that they were looking for, but also as a great resource as a childcare partner. We also show data regarding gaps of care in our community, the cost of care, the worker wages, and the thin margins of profit that providers experience, and then connecting that to our overall business. I would say that the shock value was huge. There was no understanding to that level of what this particular industry faced, and then connecting that back to how it was impacting our employees. The resounding, chorus after presenting the data was yes, 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 we need to do something more than we were already doing, because we do have really good benefits that support families. The paid leave after you have a child for both parents, the maternal leave and the paternal leave, adoption care, things of that nature. So this was taking it to the next step. Next. So one of our newest initiatives, I'm going to kind of work backwards because I'm really excited about this one. We haven't rolled out yet. Is a partnership agreement with one of our local providers, and they have multiple centers in different locations throughout our community, which was super attractive. We spent a lot of time visiting on site and talking to the owners and watching as the interaction between the providers and the children, what that looked like, where their outside spaces were, what some of their needs might be, because we want to be a good community partner beyond just, hey, we want to, have our people send their children to you. So our provider helps us secure some of the capacity for our employees because we have those non-traditional shifts. So we had great need with the extended before and after school care, and then also, call-in or emergency care. So it checked 3 of the 4 boxes for us with a willingness to continue to partner and build this together, so that we had options for people that maybe didn't have care or were just moving into the area. In addition to that, we wanted to make sure that we were leveraging, state incentives to make care more affordable and pushing that out, to our employees so that they had an awareness of different resources that were available to them. And again, our Great Start to Quality partners helped with that as well. So we're going to just be launching our partnership with this provider this summer, and using this as an investment. So we were able to pivot away from the let's build our own, type of model to let's partner and invest in what already exists. We've also incorporated Michigan's TriShare, and we were one of the first employers in the state to do that under the pilot, and care share funding programs. And we did not limit anybody's income for care share. Right now, all of our employees can have 1/3 of their care paid for, because sometimes it's just the right thing to do. In addition to that, we are going to be launching an employee resource group shortly that will help with the two-way communication and how the supports we put in place are working, what else is needed, and so forth. So, we have a person that's going to lead that, and then wouldn't you know it, right here in our finance department, we had somebody that used to be a child care provider, but when she had children, she stayed home and started her own provider. Like, she left the workforce, right? And so now she's back in the workforce because her kids are school age. So she's going to help to co-lead that and then provide some deeper insights. So I feel like we're super fortunate to have her expertise as we navigate this. Next slide. So we are early in our rollout. We've been doing TriShare for a number of years. We partner with a community partner that has worked with us for probably maybe 4 or 5 years on helping to navigate things like childcare, transportation, all of those pieces. But CareShare was brand new this year. Our ERG will also be brand new this year. Our partnership will be new this year. And we have other things that we would like to do in subsequent years. So we're excited about where that goes. So our focus is going to be tracking the data so that we can continue to show the return on investment, where the needs are, and making sure, as many of you have already said, that we're not trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, but we're meeting people where they're at, and we're solving the problems that they actually have lifted up as an issue for us. It is about doing that work and doing those surveys. I cannot emphasize that enough. But not just deploying a paper pencil survey, but also talking to your people afterwards and staying engaged with them if you're going to be able to move that needle. That makes all the difference in the world. There's a ton of data out there on childcare gaps and potential issues, but you want to make sure that you are addressing and putting in place solutions that align with what your employees' needs are. So we'll be tracking, again, the enrollment, the utilization, the correlation with retention and engagement. We're launching, as I mentioned, CareShare without any income limitations. We want to see how well utilized that is, and then feedback from our employees in terms of that benefit. And then also, from our teams that are helping to administer those things. Next. So this is probably one of the biggest takeaways for many of our leaders, is that this is really a values issue and not a transactional one. When we start talking to employees intentionally around this, the depth of emotion around this issue was very, very evident. Logistics and costs, we expected to hear those kinds of things, but a lot of it was really like that gut-wrenching guilt and leaving their children and the stress with not having stable arrangements. Those are the types of things that people really wanted to talk about in roundtables and one-on-one, and how that was affecting their ability to focus because they were worried. We do have like predictable schedules, so that's a real bonus, so people can help to organize around that. But depending on the shift that you're at, figuring out that care, can be a little bit challenging. And so we're hoping with our partnerships moving forward that we'll be able to address that to a degree with folks. And so that piece in and of itself, and hearing from employees, really helps to paint that picture that, the real work isn't building, everything from scratch, but it's making those connections. We have such a robust community, I would say, around Michigan in this particular area. But like right in our region, I was so proud of how people came together to collaborate around this and to intentionally try to solve problems and solutions. And it wasn't really difficult in this areas we've been talking about for so long to get people to see it as an economic development piece. And this is, where employers are looking to invest. We've got many projects in the works. And so they're looking at, where's my talent, where's my childcare, my transportation, and my housing, right? And so this was a big piece of that. And it became a strategy within our community. And people across, I think 4 or 5 counties have worked together to be able to talk about solutions and to trade best practices and to collaborate. So that's been the most inspiring and rewarding piece of this work, because in all my years, and there've been many of them, too many to count, I've not seen greater collaboration around something and sustained. So it's not, in and out, and people are like, okay, it's not really an issue anymore. It's continuing to lift that up, because even if people are not banging the drum saying that it's an issue, you don't know that it's not. I don't think that that's the case. I think it's just, there's lots of things to talk about. And so we need to continue to put this front and center so that it remains a focus. And next.
Yeah, Jenny, thank you so much. I think that you are again an example that people can take their lead from about what it took for you to step into this space. It isn't always the champions internally don't always come from the C-suite. They don't always come from HR. They can come from anywhere in an organization. So if you feel like you aren't in a position to influence, please know that you are, because you're not doing this alone. I think Michigan's infrastructure, which Jenny was just talking about, like this has been sustained now for quite some time. And I think the state's investment in us staying together as coalitions says a lot, right? Because so much is being accomplished together. You're not doing this alone. You're not starting from scratch. The tools are out there. We've got these champions that are available to you to learn from. I know that these 2 women specifically are so accessible. I've got Duncan and Hemlock on speed dial. Jenny will be in meetings and she will be texting me because she needs a data point that I might be able to get her somewhere, right? Like this is how we work together to make these things move forward. And so Sherry and I are going to do a kind of a lightning round right now of questions for Jenny and Liz, and so that we can get to some of the final closing remarks that we want to be able to make. And I'll start with a question that I hope both of you get a chance just to answer really briefly, and that is, what's one lesson you wish you knew at the beginning of your journey? I don't know which of you would like to go first. Liz, how about you? Give Jenny's voice a break.
Yeah. I think for us, Kathy, it was that I think you quickly start to realize that this is such a huge challenge that team members are facing, and you get a bit impatient and you're like, I want to jump in and solve it now. And I want this one solution, and this will take care of things, right? Because we're in the business world, we tend to be kind of results focused people. So I think for us, it was understanding patients and listening and just taking a little bit of a patient look around what different solutions could be for team members facing these challenges.
Thanks, Liz. Jenny?
And I would say that companies and providers do not talk together about this issue in the same room, and they don't talk the same language. So bringing the 2 together, so it's not like unusual, right? It's just part of what we do. It's so foundational to working towards solutions, because you're going to have business solutions that are going to help providers, and providers are going to help businesses understand the true landscape. And I just think it's critically important. And so we've been doing a lot of backtracking in that space, but that's something that at the beginning of the journey that would have been extremely helpful.
Thanks, Jenny.
Great. So I get to go next. What's been the biggest barrier your organization had to overcome to get to your solution?
I think for us, the biggest barrier was helping senior level leaders to understand that this is an issue that does affect productivity and turnover and all of those key measurables that people at that level look at and are invested in. So, just using our influence based on what we were hearing from our team members and kind of weaving that into a more strategic direction on where we wanted to go.
That was definitely our biggest barrier as well. But also the financial investment in it and getting people to understand, like, this is really important. It's part of our business, but showing the ROI and just the different cases in terms of like it pays for itself in a year or less time. Like that was a piece that really resonated with people that, as Liz said, are very, results oriented, and they want to see the data and they want to see the numbers. So both of those pieces were heavy lifts in the beginning.
Thank you both. I am going to do an audible here, Sherry, and go to our lightning round question that we had in the slide deck. And I'd like to hear from both of you, Liz and Jenny, if you had to complete this sentence. Every employer can begin by, Liz.
I would say listening.
Awesome.
Keep taking mine.
I'm gonna let you go first.
Sorry,
next time,
Jenny.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that, like, really talking to your people with intentionality and listening to what they're telling you. That's foundational, whether it's surveys or in person or both.
Mhm. Well, I didn't pay you both for saying that, but that is exactly what I think both Sherry and I would recommend as folks who've been trying to support employers to step into this space, that it costs you nothing and the payoff is really, really great. Not only in creating a journey to your solutions, but also in creating a trusting culture within your organization. People feel valued when they feel heard. And so providing yourself with a way for you to be accessible and for you to listen, it pays off in huge dividends. So thank you both very much. That was really, really powerful. I want to remind folks on this next slide that wherever you are in this journey, there is a next step, right? So when you begin with listening, I want you to visit the Pulse Roadmap. We're going to send you lots of different links. I don't want you to get overwhelmed, but just know that if there's a data point you need, it's out there. I am certain of it, right? If you need somebody to just talk through these things and you want somebody to help you analyze your surveys, there are folks out there who are positioned to do that, either in your regional childcare coalition or you can reach out to Pulse. We want to make sure that you know that you are not alone on this journey. And I think that Liz and Jenny have done a beautiful job of helping you understand that they didn't do this alone, right? They were talking about how they did this in community and that it has resulted in great things. We are still too early in the journey in Michigan for us to be able to put like a stake in the ground with our own report about the ROI and the impact on our workforce, but we are moving towards that, right? We want to be able to say that we are attracting new families and new businesses. People are coming here because they know we are a family-friendly state. And it starts with all of us doing the things that we can do. And so I want to thank everybody for being here. And before you go, because you cannot, we have a survey we would like you to complete because we need your feedback. If this was helpful for you, what could we have done differently? We really want to know how you experience this. So we're going to keep this slide up for a second and let you know, give you a chance to take your phones out and actually take a picture of it so that you can not take a picture of it. You just scan it. How old am I? So you can do the survey. We will be monitoring that pretty closely. And I want you all to mark your calendars for, we can leave this up and I'll just name it. Yeah, it's okay. I'll leave that up in case anybody is slowed like I am apparently right now. July 15th is our next webinar. We have got Josh McCabe from Niskanen Center in DC who's going to talk to us about 45F. That is a tax incentive for businesses who invest in childcare. All the questions you want to ask and get answered will happen there. We're also going to hear from Shannon Garrett from the MiLEAP, who actually is the administrator for my TriShare and my CareShare. So she'll answer all of our questions around those deep investments that we've got in community. We'll also have Early Childhood Investment Corporation talking about their work. And then August 12th, really to put a final touch on this, our final in this series is going to be about employers using their voice to change the entire movement here, to influence things beyond just their four walls. And we have somebody from Texas who's going to join us as our keynote speaker, who is, when you get a chance to listen to her, Wendy Uptain, she runs Early Matters Texas. She's very inspirational, and she has figured out a way to like translate into business speak why business leaders should be involved in this childcare effort. So I really hope that you join us for that. If you've registered the one time, then you've registered for all of them. You will receive the materials. We want you to make sure that you complete this survey, follow up. We'll follow up with the resources as well as this slide deck and the recording. Again, check your spam, because sometimes it goes into there, and it will be coming from our Pulse email address. So just be on the lookout for that. We want you to share what you learned with your colleagues and with other folks. Share it broadly, share it widely. This is important information to get out there. And we want to make sure that you know that it takes a small step to get into this, and you will not regret it. And I want to give our forever thanks to our panelists, my fellow moderator and Sherry. You could read about this in a case study, right? Those are helpful, but to hear out of people's mouths what they're doing and to be able to see the passion and commitment they bring to this, I think there's nothing like that. There's no substitute for it. So we're appreciative of MiLEAP for sponsoring this and helping us put it together in a way that's going to be meaningful. And so we look forward to receiving your feedback and to seeing you on July 15th. Sherry, Liz, Jenny, Angie, thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.